All right, let's be honest for a second. Saving your first $100,000 can feel like climbing a mountain with a backpack full of bricks. You work, you get paid, you try to be responsible, and somehow the money still disappears like it has a personal vendetta against your bank account. You're not alone. For most people, the first 100,000 feels impossible, not because they're lazy or reckless, but because they're trying to do it with the wrong approach. They're relying on motivation, random budgeting apps, or the classic "I'll just try harder next month" strategy. And that's exactly why they stay stuck. But here's the truth. Your first $100,000 is not about luck. It's not about being born into money. And it's definitely not about finding the perfect stock at the perfect time. It's about building a system that forces progress, even when you don't feel like it. My name is Quinn, and welcome to Quinn Invests US. On this channel, we talk about money in a way that actually makes sense for real life. No hype, no fantasy, no pretending you can day trade your way to freedom. Just the strategies that consistently work. And today, I'm going to walk you through the fastest realistic way to save your first $100,000. Without cutting the core message, without skipping the important details, and without pretending you need a six-figure salary to do it. Because once you hit that first $100,000, something changes. And I don't mean emotionally, though that happens too. I mean mathematically. When you have $2,000 invested, the market can go up 10% and you barely notice. $200, that's whatever. It doesn't feel like momentum. But at $100,000, the same 10% move is $10,000. Now it's real. Now compound growth stops being a motivational poster and starts becoming a force you can actually see. That's why people say the first $100,000 is the hardest. Because early on, you are doing almost all the heavy lifting. Your portfolio isn't carrying you yet. You're carrying it. And that's exactly why the strategy for the first $100,000 should be different from the strategy for the second $100,000. In the beginning, your biggest advantage isn't picking winners. It's increasing your savings rate, removing friction, avoiding expensive mistakes, and letting time and consistency do their job. So I'm going to break this down the way it should be understood, not as random tips, but as a clear sequence, a framework, a system. And as we go, I want you to keep one idea in your head the entire time. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. Most people don't fail because they choose the wrong index fund. They fail because they never build a repeatable process that happens automatically. So let's start with the part people hate hearing, but it's the foundation of speed. If you want to save $100,000 fast, you need to create a gap between what you earn and what you spend. That gap is the engine. No gap, no wealth. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how much you know about investing, or how many finance videos you've watched. If you spend everything you earn, you're building nothing. And what's wild is how many people tell themselves they have no room in their budget, while simultaneously bleeding money through the exact same categories. They have subscriptions they forgot about. They upgrade phones that still work. They finance cars like they're leasing self-esteem. They eat out constantly because it feels like a small treat, and then they act confused when they can't build savings. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy life. I'm saying speed requires prioritization. If your goal is to hit $100,000 quickly, you need a season of focus. Not forever, not a lifetime of deprivation. A season, because the first $100,000 is the foundation that makes everything else easier. Once the foundation is built, you can ease up, but before that, you want momentum. Now, the biggest mistake people make is thinking the solution is cutting tiny things while ignoring the big decisions. Yes, the daily coffee adds up, sure, but the real speed comes from what I call the big three expenses: housing, transportation, and lifestyle inflation. Let's talk housing first, because housing is the heavyweight champion of your budget. If you're spending 40 or 50% of your take-home pay on rent or a mortgage, saving $100,000 quickly becomes brutally hard. Not impossible, but harder than it needs to be. And the fastest way to increase your savings rate isn't earning more, though that helps. It's lowering your fixed costs, even temporarily. People underestimate how powerful one housing decision can be. If you reduce your housing costs by just $600 a month, maybe by getting a roommate, moving a little farther out, negotiating, house hacking, renting a room, downsizing for a couple years, that's $7,200 a year. Now invest that consistently while you're working on the rest of your plan, and you're not just saving faster, you're compounding faster. Housing is not just an expense, it's a lever, and it's one of the few levers that can instantly create a large monthly surplus without you feeling like you're constantly fighting yourself. Next is transportation, which is where millions of people destroy their ability to build wealth without even realizing it. Car payments are the silent wealth killer. People will argue with you, get defensive, justify it, but talk about reliability, talk about needing a nicer car for their job, and the entire time they're paying $700 a month for a depreciating asset. A car is not an investment. It is not wealth. It is a cost. And if your goal is to save $100,000 fast, the math is brutal. High car payments slow you down. If you drop your payment from $700 to $300, that's $400 a month. That's another $4,800 a year. Now you've freed up housing savings plus car savings, and suddenly you're stacking $10,000 to $12,000 a year without even touching the smaller expenses. This is why wealthy people often drive boring cars. Not because they can't afford better, but because they understand the opportunity cost. Every dollar you send to a car payment is a dollar that cannot compound. Now, the third big category is lifestyle inflation. This one is sneaky, because lifestyle inflation doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like progress. You get a raise, so you upgrade the apartment. You get a bonus, so you upgrade the car. You start earning more, and suddenly you need nicer clothes, nicer furniture, nicer everything. And what happens? Your income rises, and your savings rate stays exactly the same. This is why you'll meet people earning $120,000 who feel broke. They don't have an income problem. They have an automation and priorities problem. So here's the rule. When your income increases, at least half of that increase should go straight to saving and investing automatically before you get used to spending it. Because if you feel the raise in your lifestyle immediately, you'll never feel it in your net worth. Now, once you've created that monthly surplus, we need to talk about the most underrated speed boost for building your first $100,000. Taxes. Most people ignore taxes like they're some unavoidable mystery. They file once a year, hope for a refund, and never think about how taxes are quietly draining their wealth-building capacity. But taxes are one of the biggest expenses you have. If you're serious about hitting $100,000 fast, you don't just focus on what you earn, you focus on what you keep. This is where tax-advantaged accounts matter. When you contribute to a traditional 401k, you reduce your taxable income. That means you keep more of each paycheck now while investing for later. Even if you're not maxing anything out, contributing enough to reduce your taxes and build investing habits is powerful. And it becomes even more powerful when we bring in the next step, the one that is literally free money. Employer match. If your job offers a 401k match and you're not getting it, you are refusing a raise. That's not dramatic, it's literal. If your employer matches 50 cents on the dollar up to a certain percentage, that match is a guaranteed return the moment you contribute. A guaranteed 50% return beats every hot stock tip you'll ever see. And if your employer matches dollar for dollar, that's a 100% return. Instantly, most people would do anything for a guaranteed 100% return, except fill out the paperwork for their retirement plan. So the move is simple. Contribute at least enough to get the full match, non-negotiable. Now, at this point, people always ask the same thing. Quinn, should I pay off debt first or invest first? And here's the honest answer. It depends on the debt. High-interest consumer debt, credit cards, personal loans with high rates needs to go. Because paying off a credit card charging 20% interest is basically earning a guaranteed 20% return. That's hard to beat, but a lower interest student loan or mortgage, that becomes a more strategic decision. The main goal for the first $100,000 is to maximize momentum without taking unnecessary risk, which means kill high-interest debt, secure the employer match, and get your investing engine running consistently. Now let's talk about investing itself, because this is where people get distracted and slow themselves down. Most people waste months trying to find the perfect strategy. They watch videos about individual stocks. They compare a dozen ETFs. They ask whether now is a good time to buy. They wait for the next dip. And while they're doing all of that, they invest nothing. Speed comes from action, not analysis paralysis. For most people, the fastest path to $100,000 is not picking stocks. It's buying diversified, low-cost index funds consistently, simple, boring, effective. Because when you buy the market through an index fund, you're not betting on one company. You're letting the entire economy do the work over decades. And the key to making this work is understanding something crucial. You do not need to time the market. In fact, trying to time the market is one of the easiest ways to sabotage your progress. People think they're being smart by waiting for a better price, but what they're actually doing is delaying compounding. If you invest consistently, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, you naturally buy at different prices over time. When the market is high, you buy fewer shares. When it's low, you buy more shares. It averages out. And here's what almost nobody understands. The best market days often happen right after the worst market days. So the person who panics and sells, then waits on the sidelines, often misses the rebound. They miss the strongest days. And missing the strongest days can destroy long-term returns. That's why the simple strategy wins. Invest consistently, stay invested, keep adding. Now we need to talk about fees, because fees are another silent speed killer. A 1% fee doesn't sound like much. But over decades, it can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, because fees don't just take money once. They take money every year on a growing balance. If you're trying to get to $100,000 quickly, you don't want your growth being drained by unnecessary costs. Low-cost funds keep more of your return. That's speed. Now, let's address the part that can dramatically accelerate your timeline, especially if your income isn't huge. Increasing income. This is where people make a mistake. They think increasing income requires burning out or working 80 hours a week. It doesn't. The fastest way to increase income is to monetize a skill you already have. Freelancing, consulting, part-time work, selling a service, doing weekend gigs, tutoring, editing, design, delivering, dog walking, whatever fits your life. But here's the most important rule if you want this to actually speed up your savings. Your extra income must have one job: investing. If you use your side income to upgrade your lifestyle, you're just rearranging the money. You're not accelerating anything. But if you route your side income directly into investments, you can dramatically speed up your path to $100,000. Even an extra $400 a month invested consistently changes the timeline. And the reason is simple. You're not just adding money, you're adding fuel to compounding. Now, I want to talk about a topic people misunderstand: dividends. A lot of new investors become obsessed with dividend stocks because they love the idea of getting paid, and dividends can be great. But if your goal is to hit $100,000 fast, the smartest move is usually to reinvest dividends automatically, because dividends are not extra money from nowhere. They are part of the return. When dividends are reinvested, they buy more shares, which create more dividends, which buy more shares. That's compounding in action. So don't get distracted by the excitement of a payout. Focus on total return and reinvestment while you're building the base. Now let's talk about psychology, the part that determines whether you actually succeed. Because saving $100,000 isn't just math, it's identity. People who hit $100,000 start seeing themselves differently. They stop seeing saving as punishment and start seeing it as power. They stop seeing investing as gambling and start seeing it as ownership. And that identity shift happens when you stop relying on motivation and start relying on systems. So here's what I want you to build: a payday system. Every time you get paid, your money moves automatically. Bills, essentials, investing, savings, handled first. Then whatever is left is your spending money. This flips the entire financial script. Most people spend first, then try to save what's left. And what's left is usually nothing. Wealth-building people save and invest first, then spend what's left. That's how you make progress without needing superhuman discipline. Now, another thing that slows people down is trying to do everything at once. They try to max every account immediately, pay off every debt instantly, start 3 side hustles, and become a budgeting robot. And they burn out. Speed comes from sustainability. Pick the levers that matter most: housing, transportation, savings rate, automation, consistency. Then layer the rest. Now let's make this practical. If you want $100,000, you need to know your pace. If you invest $1,000 a month, you can hit $100,000 in about 7 to 8 years depending on returns. If you invest $2,000 a month, you can hit it in about 4 to 5 years. And if you invest $3,000 a month, you can get there even faster. The exact timeline depends on the market, but the principle stays the same. Increase your monthly investment rate and you compress time. That's why this entire video keeps coming back to the same thing. Create a larger gap, not through misery, but through strategy. Now I'm going to hit you with the most important perspective shift of the entire video. Saving $100,000 fast doesn't mean you race to the number and then stop. It means you build the habits and systems that make the number inevitable. Because when you hit $100,000 with a solid system, you don't just reach a milestone, you become the type of person who reaches milestones. And that's when wealth stops being something you chase and starts being something you build. So let me summarize the real engine. Without turning it into a checklist, you reduce your biggest costs, especially housing and transportation, because that creates immediate monthly surplus. You prevent lifestyle inflation by sending raises into investing before your lifestyle expands. You use tax-advantaged accounts and employer match to keep more and get free money. You eliminate high-interest debt so compounding works for you instead of against you. You invest consistently in diversified, low-cost index funds instead of gambling on timing. You minimize fees, you increase income if you can, and you route extra income into investments. You reinvest dividends. You automate everything so progress happens by default. That's how you save your first $100,000 fast. And here's the best part. Once you hit that number, the game changes. Because now your money is big enough to start contributing in a noticeable way. You'll have years where the market moves and your portfolio grows by more than you saved that year. And that moment, when your money starts producing real momentum, is when people finally understand why investing is worth it. So if you're sitting there thinking, Quinn, I'm starting from zero, or Quinn, I'm barely making it, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't need to do everything instantly. You need to start. You need to build the system. And you need to stay consistent long enough for the snowball to get heavy, because the first $100,000 is hard. But it's hard in the same way the first mile of a long run is hard. Once your body adapts, the rest becomes possible. Start today. Make it automatic. Protect your savings rate. Keep investing. And a few years from now, you'll look at your account and realize you did what most people never do. You built momentum. And momentum is the real cheat code.